Welcome to WION World is One. My name is Priyanka Sharma and you're watching a special broadcast of the WION-VOA Co-Production where we bring you some of the biggest stories from America along with on-ground reports and deep analysis. Let's get started. Nearly 10% of Tonga's fighting forces are in Hawaii this month, training side by side with militaries from across the Indo-Pacific. The tiny kingdom is the only South Pacific island nation participating in the rim of the Pacific naval exercises, just as the region finds itself at the center of competing US and Chinese diplomatic and military efforts. Voice of America's Jessica Stone has this next report. Take a look.
These Tongan Marines are building personal alliances here in Hawaii to protect the future of the South Pacific. Lieutenant Felice Ciali leads the platoon.
It's really important because we don't have this kind of training environment back at home. So this is very complex for us to operate, especially my platoon.
The tiny island kingdom sent 10% of its entire military to the rim of the Pacific naval exercises. On the way, they spent 2 weeks in Australia to overcome differences in equipment, language, and culture.
With 26 different countries represented here at this naval exercise, you can imagine the kinds of communication problems that can present themselves. But one thing that's interesting is that there actually are very few translators. In fact, the way they mostly communicate is either through hand signals or through leadership that can also speak English.
The boys start to have a deeper understanding of their cultures, especially and also their languages and how to make friends to them.
Every time we talk to another nation, it's like, does anyone speak English?
Lance Corporal Michael Price says it's a trial run for teamwork under fire.
When we do it together, we can understand how each other work. So if we need to work in the future real time, then that prevents hiccups and just makes it smooth, makes it work well.
Tonga and other South Pacific nations are now at the heart of the U.S.-China strategic competition in the Indo-Pacific. Since May, the region has hosted Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong, and U.S. Special Envoy Joseph Yun. And last week, Vice President Kamala Harris spoke remotely at the Pacific Islands Forum.
The United States will launch the process to establish 2 new embassies in the region, one in Tonga, one in Kiribati.
The game is on in the Pacific.
Satu LeMay is the vice president of the East-West Center think tank.
The Vice President Harris initiatives are really terrific in terms of U.S. role and U.S. engagement. But, you know, they are contingent on congressional authorization.
It's past time for us to pick up our game, and I think we are.
Randy Shriver, former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security, says renewed U.S. engagement is already translating into action. Just days ago, a key leader in the Pacific Islands openly criticized Beijing for its failed attempt to sign the region to a security agreement.
So it's really strong evidence that China is overstepping here and trying to shape the region in ways that are really uncomfortable for our Pacific Island friends.
Which is why, he says, that the relationships formed here at the rim of the Pacific naval exercises are so important. Jessica Stone, VOA News, Honolulu, Hawaii.
And for more analysis, joining us now is Voice of America's correspondent, Jessica Stone. In fact, she's live with us on this broadcast from Hawaii. Jessica, thanks for joining us. We just saw your report. Tell us about the types of training exercises that are currently going on at RIMPAC.
Well, what you saw in that report was a lot of urban warfare training, but they're also working on naval search and rescue, live fire training, amphibious assault, where they work on dropping someone in from a helicopter, blowing up a boat, and entering from the sea onto the land. There are a total of 26 nations here at the rim of the Pacific naval drills, 38 ships, 25,000 people. So this is the largest exercise of any naval effort throughout the world. India sent its INTS Satpura, a frigate, along with a fixed-wing aircraft and troops. Heavy representation here also from Southeast Asia, as you can imagine, the Indonesians, Filipinos, Malaysians, Bruneians. Indonesia sending a frigate and 129 troops, 1 Marine platoon, as well as training control staff. Philippines debuting one of their new missile frigates. Many of these nations, at least 3 of them, actually have competing claims with China in the South China Sea. And so the Philippine naval commander told us earlier this week that he really sees these exercises as a way to push back against any country that does not follow international law on the high seas.
Right, Jessica, in the last couple of months, we've seen increased engagement with the South Pacific Islands by both China and America. What does that tell us in terms of strategic competition between these nations when it comes to the region?
Well, I think what it tells us is that it's expanding. Experts have told me that the competition is moving beyond Southeast Asia now to the South Pacific Island nations. We saw that with China's security pact that it signed with the Solomon Islands, its attempts to do so with the rest of the islands. Tonga sending 10%, as we showed in that report, of its entire military to these exercises, 45 people out of 500 total. This is actually their second year participating. They spent extra time with the Australians to work out their cultural differences. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has been there, as I said, Penny Wong from the Australian Foreign Minister, many other dignitaries from the United States, not only Joseph Yun, the Special Envoy, but Kirk Campbell, President Biden's top Asia diplomat, actually went to the Federated States of Micronesia and the Solomon Islands. So, and we had Vice President Kamala Harris make those remarks and those pledges to re-engage with the region last week. And the former Indo-Pacific commander at the Pentagon, the head of the Indo-Pacific Security Affairs for the United States government, says it is long overdue.
Right, absolutely. Jessica, thanks so much for all these inputs. Stay with us on this broadcast. We'll come back to you for you to weigh in on another story. Right, moving along, with more than 165 million square kilometers in the Pacific Ocean alone, the US Navy is now turning to driverless ships. Jessica Stone takes us along for a sneak peek at this very important military innovation.
The U.S. military is seeking out new tools to help it execute its Indo-Pacific strategy, and one of those new tools is called a USV, or an unmanned surface vessel. We got a special look at them today here at the Rim of the Pacific Naval Exercises in Hawaii.
For the first time, 4 of the U.S. Navy's unmanned surface vessels are participating in the world's largest naval exercises in the Pacific. They are overseen by Commander Jeremiah Daly, who leads the 1st Naval Division, made up of remotely operated ships. He was only permitted to give VOA an audio interview for security reasons, but did allow us to take photographs.
There is no water, there are no toilets. They are only meant to be driven in and out of port by a human for obvious safety reasons.
Commander Daly says these USVs are piloted remotely and can be armed or unarmed. But it's the lack of a human component that helps the U.S. Navy, he says, address another challenge of working with nations across the globe: communication.
Can these things talk to each other? I mean, can this USV talk to a Singaporean USV?
So for ships that have common data links and networks, yes, and they can be held by international partners.
Daly says this month his division has worked with a task force made up of Singapore, South Korea, Japan, and India. Navies that all play a significant role throughout the Indo-Pacific.
The Pacific is a large body of water, and having the right combination of unmanned systems that can sense the environment with manned systems only widens the aperture for the level of targeting and connectedness capability that not only the U.S. but our partners can have together with us.
Commander Daly says the USVs should be operational in the Navy within the next few years. Jessica Stone for VOA News, Honolulu, Hawaii.
For more analysis, we still have Voice of America's Jessica Stone with us on this broadcast from Hawaii. Jessica, what can you tell us about the other nations and their unmanned surface vessels capability?
Well, it's not actually clear whether there are other unmanned vessels here at RIMPAC in terms of surface vessels, but we do know that the South Koreans have something called the Sea Sword. They have several versions of it. It can do both underwater and surface operations independently. Those sea trials were completed in January, and there are more of that vessel on the way. Singapore also has the vessels, and we just showed you pictures of those, primarily used for maritime border patrols. Obviously, there's a lot of harbor and maritime border for Singapore to patrol. Much of these smaller vessels, much of the USVs in these other countries are smaller than the ones we were able to see here at RIMPAC that are being run by the Americans. But all of them, at this point, still need to be paired with a pilot of some kind, and often are going to be paired with a manned vessel like a destroyer or a frigate in order to operate safely.
Jessica, there's been a lot of saber rattling by Washington and Beijing when it comes to Taiwan. What can you tell us about why Taiwan is not also present at these crucial exercises?
Well, Taiwan has actually never been invited before, so it would be very unprecedented for it to do so. But hopes had gotten higher, especially in Taiwan, because President Biden signed a National Defense Authorization Act that had in it language from the U.S. Congress encouraging the Pentagon to invite Taiwan to these exercises. The administration did, however, stop short of that invitation. But there is a movement in Congress, certainly, to pressure the White House and pressure the Pentagon to show more openly a support for Taiwan. And we're seeing that in terms of the visits from senators and members of Congress, especially to Taipei. In fact, the U.S. House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, has just announced that she is expecting to go to Taipei next month. China has immediately responded, saying forceful measures are promised. If she goes, she would be the first House Speaker to go, which is the high level, the highest level in the House of Representatives, to go to Taipei in 25 years. But there are reservations in the Pentagon. President Biden telling reporters earlier this week that the U.S. military doesn't want her to go.
Right, Jessica, thanks so much for all those inputs and thanks for joining us on this special broadcast on WION World is One.